invitations from outside of Miami and outside the state. The community said, you know, you promised that this bond would be implemented in 6 to 7 years, so we're going to extend your contract to guarantee that you are here for the full implementation of the bond. And here I am, appointed in 2008. In the first year, my contract was extended 2 additional years, and now, as of a few months ago, my contract was extended for, I don't even know how many years. It feels like 2020, but actually the contract will go, I don't even know when my contract goes through, but I know it goes until, I believe, 2012, 2017, which is an unprecedented amount of time for a superintendent. I love this community. I do believe that if we crack the code of educational opportunity in Miami, we are cracking the code of educational opportunity for our country. Why? Because in as much as we have a lot of challenge and we love to criticize ourselves, the face of America is changing rapidly. And the best of demographers are anticipating that within 15 years, America will look like Miami, meaning the same challenges that we have been navigating through for decades will be America's challenges tomorrow. Delivering on a solution today in Miami is predicting and delivering a solution that's scalable nationally. Thank you very much for your time.
Any questions? Quick, maybe 5 questions.
I just have a comment. I think it speaks very well to all of us, especially when you're involved in Kate with ethics and governance, that, as you said, in the middle of a recession, we were all, or at least I'll speak for myself, and I know everyone in the room, delighted to see that there was someone not moaning and groaning about it, but actually doing something about it, and showing that, yeah, if you're ethical and you do your job, it can be done, and there's enough money to do it. That was the reason it was overwhelmingly approved, and I think that, I mean, my feeling is that if we had that kind of governance everywhere, I don't think any of us mind paying for the best. We just want to know that we're getting the best. So thank you.
I want to thank you personally. I have a son, he's Asperger's autism. At 2 years old, they told me he wouldn't speak. He will now enter Palmetto High School next year and be mainstream, and was because of the Dade County school system, especially in the last 3 or 4 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Autism is the fastest growing group within the students with disabilities environment in America. And we recognized that early on, and we actually invested considerably in establishing school laboratories for children with autism. So Blue Lakes Academy was the very first one. Fantastic sensory rooms to provide students an opportunity. We were early on experimenting with the impact that digital technology had in terms of facilitated instruction for students with disabilities, particularly autistic children, who, and we really don't know why, have a much easier time connecting to an iPad, for example, and can navigate it very well than they do meeting your look or speaking directly to you or even acknowledging you. So we made a huge investment in that arena. Students with disabilities touch me deeply. I feel if we fail a few of them, we have failed ourselves in the entire system. That's one of the reasons why right now I'm at war with Tallahassee over, amongst a number of things. Number one, the way Tallahassee treats English language learners, the way Tallahassee treats, and we have 63,000 of those. And whether, it makes no difference where you side on the issue of immigration, those kids are here now, right? And I have a responsibility to teach them. And we know if we don't teach them what will happen to them. They're here, teach them. But as we teach them, we have to be cognizant of the fact that it takes more than 1 year for them to learn the language before they're tested with an FCAT. And the state right now does not accept that. The state says, regardless of how old you are, when you got here, your language fluency and proficiency, after 1 single year of English language instruction, you shall sit for an FCAT side by side with native-born speakers. Now, I speak 5 languages fluently. I am not fully proficient from an academic perspective at any one of those with the exception of English. And I'm still struggling with that. So it's not fair. What's not fair as well is the way the state wants to treat students with disabilities. In some cases, and I always use, and I took myself on a tour of special ed centers in our community, the Merrick Center, a number of schools, to ensure that what I was saying really was based on truth. And I spoke with a lot of principals and a lot of teachers and paraprofessionals. Here's what I learned. Number one, there is no tougher job in America than being a special needs teacher. And in these classrooms, where there's a teacher and a paraprofessional, maybe 6 or 7 kids, where these teachers teach them real life needs. These children, some of them will never be able to sit for an FCAT, and the state still forces them to. Some of these children with an IQ of 60, 63, and they have to sit for an FCAT, which in my opinion sometimes it's not a humane way of treating children, does not dignify them. They bathe them, they change their diapers, this is their family. And the fact that the state does not recognize that and attempts to slap F rating on these schools because these children cannot perform as high or as fast, cannot jump through the hoops like everybody else, is not fair. And the fact that we are transitioning from the FCAT now to Common Core, which I support Common Core, I have some questions about how fast we're moving in that direction and toward what end is somewhat dismaying to me. So children with disabilities, English language learners are really big in my awareness every single day. That does not mean that we concern ourselves for these kids at the expense of everybody else. No. I mean, we have made incredible strides in terms of advanced academics, expanding choice for parents by opening 30 academies or magnet programs per year for 3 years in a row. The partnerships we have with colleges and universities, allowing students to graduate high school with 2 years of college already done through dual enrollment, are incredible. So thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
We have a job for you.
Okay.
We collected Happy Dollars. You can pick a winning ticket here.
Okay. Can I just take?
Of course, of course.
Alberto, first of all, I want to thank you for your leadership. As you know, I've always been a big fan of public schools and especially our system. You mentioned a number of countries, and the one I'm very interested in is Finland.
Yeah.
And what Finland has been able to accomplish. They rank among the highest, if not the highest, internationally in student achievement. But some of their principles are master's degrees for all teachers, a very little emphasis on testing, except at this international testing level, they excelled. But their main emphasis is on equity for children, as children enter the system. So they make sure all children have nutrition, if they need psychological intervention, whatever needs they have are met. And so I just wondered if you could comment on.
Very briefly, Finland is the highest ranking nation in the world right now in terms of educational attainment. Second, right up there, at least last year, was Singapore. And the reason, you're absolutely right, the reason why Finland is in that very coveted spot is because they decided 30 years ago, this didn't happen overnight, 30 years ago, to get serious about education. They decided not to allow educational policy decisions to be influenced by partisan perspectives. They actually are rooted in best practice and research, which is something we don't do in this country anymore. Educational policy decisions in Tallahassee and beyond are driven by think tanks who are deeply influenced by partisan perspectives, not by what the research proves to be the best approach. Finland respects its teachers, but Finland also made a decision to recruit into the teaching workforce the top 1/3 of graduates, rather than allowing typical market forces to dictate who got into education. And I'm being kind there when I say normal market forces, which is, well, if a teacher's salary is $40,000 a year, beginning teacher salary, which is the beginning teacher salary in Miami, and by the way, that's the highest in the state of Florida, $40,000, versus what a beginning attorney or somebody with a business degree or a doctor makes. What kind of talent are we going to bring into education? In Finland, the parity of salaries is there. So they're able to to capture and to attract, to retain, incentivize very, very good talent. Also, this is an interesting commentary. You heard my comment about unions make it very, very tough sometimes to have conversations regarding teacher effectiveness and employment and the best assignment to the neediest schools. In Finland, 100% of teachers are unionized. Interesting, 100%. Actually cannot be a teacher in Finland unless you belong to a union. But there is no conflict between management and the union. Actually, the union is a partner in terms of professional development for teachers. In Finland also, this is very contrary to the practice in the US, there are no magnet programs, schools of choice. It is the same type of school for everyone. And so when we talk about equity, their emphasis is on high educational standards for all, regardless of the school, of the area, the region, the neighborhood, period. But it took 30 years to get there. And they did, in my opinion, everything right to get to that point. They do not bother with assessments like we do. They do not have the equivalent of the FCAT in Finland. You're right. They do subscribe, they do test their children for internationally benchmarked standards. So they take the PISA, which is a very good assessment to know whether or not your kids are achieving in reading, math, science, etc. And consistently, year after year, they excel. Some people usually say, well, but Finland is a very small country, very homogeneous country. Not anymore. Actually, Finland has become quite diverse, and even if you discount or you make some allowance for the diversity factor in size, they're still really outperforming by a whole lot the rest of the world. So there's a lot to learn from Finland. There's a lot to learn from the way mathematics is taught in Singapore, for example. And as I say this, and I deliberately left Finland and Singapore because they are such extremes, very, very small entities, presumably some people say pretty homogeneous, not like America, is precisely because that's why I left them out. I touch on these big giants, Brazil, where they're contemplating right now giving a device with content to every child in Brazil. The advances in China, but China, not all of China. When you leave certain reasonably urban parts of China, it's a different China. And as I said, human rights, that's a big concern in educational opportunity in China. So the last thing I'll say is interesting that we speak, and even Secretary of Education Arne Duncan and our president, they often talk about Finland and how our students are not performing par with Finland. But then they support policies that are contrary to what they do in Finland. And I submit to you, if you want to replicate those success stories, at least learn from that success story. And I'm not saying that emulate or simulate or replicate everything, but at least bring some of those elements here. Don't expect to do something completely different and arrive or reach the same set of outcomes. So thank you very much for that.
One other. Is there another county or municipality in the United States that is not like a Brazil or a Finland, but some other place in our America that you feel is striving to?
I see a head nodding over there. Well, when I talked about the Broad Prize, the Broad Prize is the highest, by the way, provided by the private sector, provided by Eli and Edith Broad Foundation, huge investors in education today and educational reform, and that is the gold standard. So when you get the Broad Prize, it says that you are the highest performing urban district in America. So unfortunately now, the good thing is you got it. The bad thing is, who do you compare yourself to? Nationally. So I'm really not comparing myself to anybody nationally. I am part of a consortium of international entities that looks seriously at international benchmarks, recognizing that that's a new economic reality. Why in the world do I want to compare myself to Broward County? They can't even run their buses on time. But the point I'm making is that it's tempting because they're in the same marketplace, right? Same media market, right? Michael Putney will talk about us and talk about them. But from an economic perspective, trust me, Broward's kids are not going to be competing against Miami-Dade's kids for very important jobs. No. And by the way, it's almost irrelevant to compare us to California or New York. No. The new reality is that borders have come down, mainly economic and financial borders, and now the competition is much broader, it's much more crowded, it's much more colorful, and we need to fixate our attention on that and look at what other people are doing across the globe. As I said earlier, not in an attempt to outcompete them, but in an attempt to outpace ourselves. Can we move faster, smarter on behalf of our kids? And that's what I'm doing. So I'm looking at Finland, I'm looking at Singapore. You know, you probably don't know, but I have right now a few dozen teachers and principals in China. We will be bringing Chinese students, high school ends in 11th grade. In China, then they have 1 year to prepare for college. And the reality is there aren't enough seats, university seats in China for all of the eligible students. So when they graduate there, I'm giving them an opportunity to come here. They will pay us $35,000 a year. I will reimburse the state of Florida for their FTE cost, $6,000. And then they can apply to go to American colleges and universities. But what I get is this really very symbiotic relationship where I can learn from some of their practices, and simultaneously, they're learning from our practices. So, unfortunately, I know Mooresville, interesting little county, a district of 5,000 kids. They gave everybody a laptop, and then the kids didn't know what to do with it, and they didn't train their teachers. So I sent the team over there to learn from them as I'm venturing into device empowerment for students, to find that they miss critical steps. So I would love to have a partner to learn from, of same scale as Miami-Dade. Unfortunately, there isn't one. So I broaden my horizons. I'm playing around in different continents.
Awesome.
Thank you very much.
Last three numbers.